think maybe like 5 years ago I started describing myself as I'm an artist because I'm an activist. In my 20s, really struggled to figure out where my voice was in that work. I moved back to St. Louis in 2012 and was here when Mike Brown was killed, and was very involved in the Ferguson uprising. And as I became more and more involved, I was naturally gravitating towards other artists who were involved. And it was sort of this moment of awareness of, yeah, my activism is really, really linked to my creativity. And I think that that's largely because that's how I connect with people. So when I was in college, I did a study abroad program called Rethinking Globalization. And we were in multiple countries, including India. And while we were in India, we really focused a lot on the cotton industry and how that relates to the political and economic independence of India historically, and then also today. There's a very high rate of suicides among cotton farmers. I was learning this as a 20-year-old and feeling like, oh my gosh, I've worn cotton my entire life and I don't even know if I knew it was grown in India, let alone like that thousands of farmers have suicided because of the stress and the difficulty of growing it. I couldn't leave that story, like it just stuck with me, and I applied to go back to India and live and work with a community of cotton farmers to better understand what the situation was and, you know, what was the context that led to this epidemic of suicides. My main goal in going was to work with the farmers to create something together that could tell this story of their experiences. I wouldn't say that the result, Faceless Farmers, really is that, because it was my idea. But it was actually the way that I explained to them what I was trying to do, how to use visual art to tell a story. Coming back to the US, I wanted to kind of do two things. I wanted to find ways to spread the story and raise awareness about the current issues that cotton farmers face, but then also think about how to use cotton as a material to really investigate the history of race in the United States. And the first kind of manifestation of that was taking the Faceless Farmers' portraits, where they're holding the cotton in front of their face, on clothing. And then I started to think more about how to connect that to race in the United States. And it took me a long time. I was very wary of how to do that work as a white person. And I took a trip down to Montgomery, Alabama. I visited the Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. And so the memorial is for victims of racial terror lynchings. And so sort of both of those experiences led to the work in my thesis. I began with looking at the stories of the women and the girls who were the cause of these racial terror lynchings. As I'm doing all of this research, I'm like, okay, but where are the ladies who opposed this, who fought against this work? And then I learned about a woman named Jessie Daniel Ames who founded Southern Women for the Prevention of Lynching. Basically what she did was she organized women in the South to go to communities where these lynchings had happened, to put pressure on the local law enforcement to make sure that they protected anyone that was arrested so that these lynchings couldn't occur. I started to wonder, well, who were the women that joined this organization? You know, they were Underground Railroad conductors, they were lecturers, they fundraised, and through their fundraising supported abolitionist newspapers and publications. The risks that these women took, the ways that they leveraged their privileges and the roles that they already had in society. There's so much that I'm learning about how to organize and how to resist and how to fight for liberation. And so that's where the Legacy Quilt Project, how it came to be. I lay out these portraits and I'm asking participants to just go to who they're drawn to. I show examples of ways that I have visually represented the impact and the legacy of women. Then we kind of work together to think about different ways that they can do that for the woman that they've chosen. And eventually I will piece them all together and they'll form a quilt. And it lives on into the future. And so not only are we uplifting these legacies that have been, set aside throughout history, we're also creating our own legacy of sharing these stories and building a community that can go forward and keep doing the work.